we invite them in, but we don't recognize them. We want to make sure that they're recognized, all of them, from those who came from New Jersey and wherever else you came from. We're glad to have you here. And Chicago, Canada. Yes. All right, Canada. Wonderful, wonderful. And for all of those who are not here, I would suggest, since some people didn't get a chance to be here, some of you put this on, let this run on Facebook Live or something so that people can have an opportunity to see this, because I think what we have to cover here is an important thing. Today, my remarks are going to be looking at human rights yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I think that it's apropos that we're looking at it this way. I want to just, one more thing I want to pull up here. Just want to make sure all this is done appropriately here. Okay, good. There we go. So we want to make sure that as we are thinking about these things, I want to take just a moment to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days, because you all could be many other places than being here today. But I think that you took the time to be here means that we have the right to task you. I'm going to take some of my time to actually ask that we be engaged in some things and to think about how we become engaged. We think about today, this is 74 years after the UN Charter was signed in 1945. This is 74 years. And there were 50 countries that signed at that time. So that means the next year is the 75th year. So those of you who are all in the UN business and in international and the community service, many of you know that. But those of you who don't know that's an important milestone, that next year will be the 75th anniversary of the UN, which was ratified October of that year. Now, it's already been mentioned about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that was ratified on this day, that it was today, December 10th, 1948. So that means it's 71 years to the day that the UN, the folks got together and ratified this today. The original drafters were from Lebanon, the USSR, China, France, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Chile, and Canada. That's where we find the folks who were involved in drafting the Declaration of Human Rights. So what that says is that there was a lot of folks who were left out. There were a lot of places left out. There were a lot of ideas left out. And so we want to embark upon how do we begin to incorporating those other ideas into this? How do we get to the place where we start opening our ideas and minds about this process? And I think that we have some important things to think about. One of the conditions of the Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the General Assembly on the 10th, was about the Second World War, right? Was a response to the Second World War. But at the same time, it wasn't about that, right? That it was about the culmination of human history that had seen lots of things going on, not just the Second World War, but lots of conflicts around the world, and that the people involved were pushing for something to be done. There were things that happened before the declarations of the Declarations of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed and not only signed, but was discussed and drafted. There was lots of things that were done prior to that. There were diverse pressures of the peoples of the world, and there's those voices that first is, what do we do to address the crack in the glass, right? Because the forces from outside will continue to increase the pressure to force their way in. Because as we talk about, I'm a sociologist and a Pan-Africanist. And as we think about the glass ceiling as an example, that oftentimes there's a pressure to move beyond the glass ceiling, right? That invisible layer where women and underrepresented folks are oftentimes excluded from certain circles. Socioeconomically, folks are excluded from certain circles. Religiously, people are excluded from certain circles. But the thing is that we need to think about differently today is we want to be aiding in the cracking of the glass. We don't want to run away from the glass being cracked, because our responsibility should be to open the door to more opportunities. And that means that the glass has to be broken. That means that we have to think about how we are going to contribute to breaking the glass. And not only do we contribute to breaking the glass, but we also have to think about how do we protect those who are going to be bombarded by the glass that's spreading, right? So that we have to do something, we have to work on both sides of the glass as we're thinking about breaking those barriers down, as we're thinking about changing the parameters of the world in which we live. We must look for the weaknesses in the glass. We must look to ways to protect those from the shattered glass. And some of this was done, right? We can see, we look at the MDGs and the SDGs, that we begin to see that those were places that the UN had tried to develop some of those things. So the MDGs are the Millennium Development Goals, for those who don't know, and there was 8 Millennium Development Goals, and those things were endeavoring to challenge some of those things. They were trying to penetrate the glass of inequality, penetrate the glass of inaccessibility, penetrate the glass of all those types of things that impeded people's access to things, health, and environmental sustainability. Of course, we all know that those came to an end in 2015. So since those came to an end in 2015, we've got to think about what's the next step. Well, the UN came up with the next step, and that was the SDGs, and that was the Sustainable Development Goals, of which there's 17. And the deadline for that is 2030. What does that mean? That we don't have far to go. Next year is 2020, 10 years. Are we going to be able to accomplish all of these things in that time frame? Are we going to make sure that there's clean water for everyone? And are we going to make sure that water is either free or affordable? Are we going to make sure that we attend to the environment? Are we going to make sure that we attend to the health of people? And are we going to attend to the idea of zero hunger? Think about that. The idea of no hunger. When we have food right outside here, you go to an event and a third of the food is thrown away, right? Even the people who work in the hotels right here in Manhattan, do you know that they can't consume the food that you waste or that is wasted at a conference? If they get caught taking the food that is there, they lose their jobs. We have systematically set up systems of waste, systematically set up systems of deprivation, systematically set up systems of lack when there doesn't need to be lack, systems of need when there doesn't need to be need, systems of hierarchy when there doesn't need to be hierarchy. We have the ways and the ideas about addressing these things, but sometimes we refuse to implement them. Now, we can take another step back. Before the UN, there was the Universal Declaration before the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We can look back from today to 75 years ago, and we want to think about what was that like, right? What was the world like? What did the world present to us in that time? And when we think about that, the League of Nations was here, and that was a response to World War I. But that wasn't the only response. Sometimes we get caught up in the world and ways in which we were engaged in things, but we don't look deeply in it. And I want to take 2 seconds to take a step out, though. When we go back and look at the UN Charter, I lived in South Africa for a while, and one of the drafters of the UN Charter, the signers of the early versions of the preamble, was John Smuts from South Africa. So they went back and in South Africa, we know the history of what happened there, which didn't end until 1994, when Mandela was, he was released from prison before then, but in 1994, when I was there, That's when he got elected. And so that was the official end of apartheid. But those who were engaged in apartheid were part of the drafting of these human rights documents. So what is it that they were drafting, and what were they protecting? For whom were they protecting things? Was everybody in their collective consciousness of that or not? When we think about these things, I want us to go back even further, because there were other folks thinking about these things around the world. In 1900 was the first Pan-Africanist Conference. It was held in London, organized by Henry Sylvester Williams, attended by W.E.B. Du Bois. Now here you have these folks who are primarily looking at issues related to Africa, but what they were looking at were the same things that come up to be drafted in the UN documents, because this was an early push on the glass. They were poking the glass, trying to get it broken to say that we need to change how African people are treated. Of course, we have to look at the full picture though, because not long before then, in 1884 and 1885, what did we have? That was the Berlin Conference. 1884, 85, that was the dividing up of Africa. There was no Africans involved in the dividing up of Africa. I'll say that again. There were no Africans involved in the dividing up of Africa. The folks that came there were looking at ways to stop their own conflict over their pillage of Africa, its people and its resources. Because what they were doing, obviously, that there was a huge slave trade market, that the enslaving of Africans, right? They weren't slaves, they were enslaved. That there was a push to control and dominate things and to find better ways to control and dominate. But this is a precursor of someone a group trying to solidify the glass. Sometimes what you have is people trying to develop a better glass. So as we're trying to break the glass, someone else is trying to develop glass that is thicker and stronger, right? That is more obscure. In other words, you can't see it. We need to make sure that the glass is visible, that we know it's there, that we know that we can poke and prod it and break it down. One of the things I want us to think about today is, here are the two objectives. There's two things. One is, what are the hopes and visions of our predecessors 75 years ago? That is, what did they expect the world to be like today, right? I'm adding a few months to my time. What did they expect the world to be like? What were they hoping for as their legacy? The other one is, what legacy do we want to leave for those behind us to inherit in 2095? Just two generations away, really. That is, what are the people in that time frame going to say about us? What are they going to say about our contribution to the world? Are they going to look back and say, we didn't do all that we could to break the glass? Are they going to look back at us and say that we were insufficient in our efforts to address the world? I think that we need to look at something that both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X said. You know, Malcolm X, I'm here continuing the vein of Malcolm X. Malcolm X wanted to bring an address before the United Nations to talk about the situation of Africans in America, to talk about the atrocities that we faced in those times. And in fact, we continue to face those atrocities, whether it's police brutality or joblessness or homelessness or other inadequate education. That Malcolm would be here. If he were here, he would be saying, what have we done since then? Since the 60s? We don't want to be in a place where in the next 75 years, that 2 generations away population looks back at us and says, we didn't do all that we could. We were inadequate in our endeavors to transform the world. we didn't think wide enough and broad enough in our endeavors to bring about transformation in the world. So I want us to think broadly. I want us to think, and there's a couple of ways I want us to think. One is a way that Ghanaians talk about, and that is looking at Sankofa. Sankofa is a bird that flies one direction and looks back while it's looking back at the other direction. And the point of the bird is that we have to know where we came from to know where we're going. And I want us to think about that, that we have to look at as far back as we can. And so as we think about that, I want us to think about a couple of things, right? I'm a Pan-Africanist, so I'm going to come at this from a Pan-Africanist perspective. Martin Luther King Jr. suggested that we need a revolution of thought, that we need to think differently, completely eradicate the way that we think today to bring about a new reality. The Yoruba have an idea called Iwa Pele, which is good character. At a foundation, good character is everything. Embedded in good character is balance, though. So we have to understand an older idea called Ma'at, and I know my time is limited, but Ma'at is a concept, an ancient Kemetic or Egyptian concept. The Greeks called them Egypt, they would call themselves Kemites. This ancient concept was about balance. Ma'at is truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. And so they were trying to strive to bring that into being. And the Yoruba had the same idea. At the core of that, though, and I'm going to kind of wrap up with this, at the core of that, there were two things. One is in this book here, The Teachings of Ptahhotep. This book is one of the oldest books, complete books in the world. It's 2500 BC. It was written by Ptahhotep, who was advisor to one of the pharaohs. So that what he says in here, though, he's teaching him about humility. And he says that you can find gemstones amongst the maidens at the grindstone. In other words, he's telling him that greatness can be found anywhere. Wisdom can be found anywhere. So when Ambassador said, talk to the youth, make room for the youth, the point is that we have to use our time and space and allow the youth and others who are oftentimes excluded from society to be included in society because they have value to offer. We have to open our ears to do so. And lastly, Carter G. Woodson suggests to us, he wrote several books, but one of the things, and this is for us to refer back to our own parents, to refer back to our own beginnings. He says his father said to him, learn to accept insult, to compromise on principle, to lead your fellow man, or to betray people is to lose your soul. In other words, he's saying to us that we've got to be grounded in what we know. We've got to make sure that the way we look at things, that we understand that we have to be holistic in what we do, and we can't come at to find the solution to something in a narrow way. If we're humble and holistic, then we will transform the world. And I suggest to you that we can, and that we have the responsibility to transform the world by looking out for a new vision. And we must be holistic in terms of the people, in terms of the ideas and the places. Thank you very much.
It's a little challenge for a short guy like me to adjust the microphone after Brother Khalfani. Just like Brother Khalfani said that we should give space to the youth. I'm going to acknowledge our very dear friend, our brother, His Excellency Ambassador Nicholas Ella from Nigerian Consul General. Thank you so much, brother. and also our very dear sister from the ambassador from the Sierra Leone mission. Thank you so much for coming, sister. Thank you so much. I told Brother Fode that he'll be coming, but he said you're traveling. So I said, don't worry, she's coming. I know she's coming. Thank you so much for coming. Now, you have to help me with something, all of you. Promise you will. That's how we are going to move forward. The next speaker I'm going to invite, I want you to stand up and give her a standing ovation. She's the youngest human rights activist I've ever seen. A very, very dear, lovely young lady, and her name is Fatiha Ayat.
Stopped.
And I can assure you, if you don't like the speech, I'll refund your money. She's going to be our hero. She's going to be our future, right?
Yes.
One more round of applause.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fatiha Ayat. I am 8 years old and a child rights activist. Thank you for giving me this wonderful opportunity to talk here in this prestigious program. I consider myself as a privileged portion of this. I consider myself as a privileged child in the society. But I know that there are millions of children outside of this room in different parts of the world whose human rights are being severely compromised. The world leaders of today seem to have very less concern that 152 million children are being engaged in child labor, and 73 million of them are being forced to work long hours under hazardous conditions. Hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children from different parts of the globe are traveling from their homes all across the world. Sometimes they are crossing the Mediterranean to land in Europe, and sometimes they are even landing in our southern border. But this seems to be not an issue to any of these world leaders. We know that the world leaders of today have composed hundreds of pages of paperwork. For example, there is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But this only remains as paperwork. In reality, child marriage, child abuse, and child trafficking could not be stopped. I came here today directly from my school, but I feel really bad.
Yes, girl.
But I feel really bad that the children of my age from the Indian-occupied Kashmir cannot go to school for over 6 months because of the siege by the Indian Army. But this is not only happening in Kashmir. This is also happening in different parts of the world and in different territories and countries. For example, Afghanistan, Iran, Somalia, Syria, Palestine, and Yemen, and also all over the world. In today's world, millions of children also don't have access to education, even basic necessary needs. For example, shelter, health aids, and food cannot be available to them. But the most thing that affects them is the climate and war that is facing on them. So I urge the world leaders to make sure that every child has their human rights. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
I hope I don't have to refund your money. If you agree by choice, give her another round of applause. And I thank you and I congratulate these blessed parents who have such a talented child. And beta, you are the future of our generation. You are the future of this universe. We are so proud of you. Thank you so much for coming. The next speaker is also equally talented and very, very sharp, very smart. And again, I guarantee you, if you don't like it, I can refund your money. He's a very dear friend. He's a representative of American Foundation of African Children Education. He has spent millions of dollars and years of his life trying to help African countries to raise the education level, build schools, and help the school system, education system. And he's also first vice president and director of Global Volunteers. My very dear friend, Honorable Thomas Brigandi.
Thank you so much for this invitation, Ambassador Malik. Thank you. And of course, Ambassador Fode as well. I mean, just it's a real privilege and an honor to be here. As Ambassador Malik had mentioned, I've done a fair amount of work really promoting education in Africa. So the thing about me is, while it might look like I'm some rich guy from Connecticut, I actually grew up in the inner city, and I went to New York City public schools. And it really taught me something about the value of an education, that as someone who grew up in New York City, at least I had the ability to get an education. The thing is that a lot of children in Africa, because the schools there are just not good, they don't have that same capacity. So whereas I was able to lift myself out of poverty, you have millions of children in sub-Saharan Africa and around the world, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Eastern Europe, who don't have that same sort of opportunity. So I teamed up with a very dear friend of mine, Serene Juke, over a decade ago, and it's a very sad story because he had passed away in Dakar Airport. They didn't have any defibrillators, and he had a heart attack, and he left 3, very young children behind. So, but the thing is that, his legacy is why I'm here. And I'm here to really be an evangelist for, protecting people who cannot protect themselves, and specifically with respect to education. So what we've done over the years, we've helped well over 10,000 kids in rural West Africa by repairing 9 schools, with a lot more in the pipeline. Some of these schools were in conflict regions. They had bullet holes in the windows, and what we did, we were able to repair them. And it wasn't just that. We were also able to buy to buy buses for autistic children to go to school. Built a seawall for a school that was being inundated by water. So we've done a lot of good work. But I'm really here to challenge you all to really think about how you could help. Someone from New York who really didn't know much about what was going on in the plight of these children overseas can do this. Imagine people with connectivity to the region can do. So I would encourage you all to please, I'll be here for the remainder of the day, and to please talk with me, and we can discuss schools that you might know of that we could potentially repair, where you're from. And that's really why I'm here, to meet with all of you and to help your communities, and it not just in Africa, but really all over the world. We want to help. So thank you to Ambassador Malik and Ambassador Fode as well, and I look forward to meeting with many of you later today. Thank you.
Before we let him go, I have a request. There's a young, beautiful lady sitting somewhere in the back. Where is she? No, I'm not going to stop. No, it's okay. Every husband is going to be in trouble once in a while, so I want you to get in trouble. Where is this beautiful lady? Where is she? Oh. So if he says that he does not want to be punished when he goes home, it's okay. But let me explain you one thing. International Human Rights Commission, as a policy and as a organization, does not give citations or awards, but very, 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 and I'm repeating this, very rarely, we acknowledge people who have some exceptional contribution to the humanity or the human rights. So today I have a special presentation, and I'm going to request our sister Suleimani, Ambassador Suleimani, to come join us to honor a very dear friend, Mr. Brigandine. And they say Excellence in Service Award. And it does not say the name because of the shortage of time, but I promise I'll fix it. So the amount of time and money he has spent to educate the most vulnerable population of the world in Africa, I salute you for doing this. I salute you for doing this. And don't you think he deserves a standing ovation as well? Thank you. I'm still smiling if somebody else wants to take a picture. And now I'm going to request our dear sister, Ambassador Victoria Suleimani, to please come and say a few words about this beautiful day, Human Rights Day.
Yeah, good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished participants. I just want to thank you. I did not come here to speak, but as diplomats or ambassadors, you should always be ready to say something. When you are called upon to say something, I want to congratulate and thank the people, the organizers of this very important event to commemorate the Human Rights Day, because we all know human rights is a right that we all have simply because we are human beings. That is how I will put it. And you are entitled to it. It is your right. And these are all spelled out clearly in the 30 articles of the UDHR. But the most important thing I want to say, I'm going to be very brief because I really didn't come prepared to speak. I was supposed to travel, but I canceled. But there was no way an important event like this could be holding, and I chose to stay away. So I had already declined the invitation, but I had to come anyway very at this last minute. That was in fact why I came late. But I must come and I must say something. And I really want to appreciate my compatriots, Ambassador Fode and Sari. We have worked closely, and even before I became ambassador here. So that adds more value to the whole thing. That said, I just want to say the topic in itself is very relevant to my country. We are not at war. We have that sad chapter in our history ended over 20 years ago. But whenever I have an opportunity to speak about conflict situation, human rights, like this one, human rights in conflict situations, there is one thing I want everybody to take home today that most people are not really paying attention to. Human rights education. It is as important as human rights itself. We need to educate people on the importance of every article of the UDHR. This is the reason, and the group of people have said everybody should be educated on the importance of human rights, but we must focus on the young people. Human rights education in schools, human rights education in our homes, human rights education even in our offices. Experience has taught me, coming from a post-conflict background, that if we had sensitized, if we in Sierra Leone had educated our young people on the importance of human rights, maybe the magnitude of that conflict would not have gotten to the point we got. Because most of the people that perpetrated violence, the worst violation of human rights was perpetrated by young people. Why? Because they were not given the right kind of education.
Exactly.
So somebody just came from the blues with some crazy ideology and started brainwashing, because it's brainwashed. But if they are given the right kind of education, they will say, no, I have a better future. I have a right to education. I have a right to freedom of speech. I can mount any podium. Look at an 8-year-old girl. She came here and she just said what is she thinks is her right and the rights of others. So when we teach our children at home on the importance of human rights, they in turn will go to school and tell their friends. So nobody will come with any crazy idea and just brainwash them into taking guns and be perpetrating violence all over the place. So let us all take this home. Let us go back to our communities. Let us go back to our homes, our offices, our country, and encourage our leaders, those who are at the helm of affairs, to sensitize, to educate. We are doing it right now in Sierra Leone. We have human rights clubs in our schools. This was a mandate from the African Union. So it's not only Sierra Leone. We are respecting the international norms. We are respecting even the regional and sub-regional norms. So this is what I want everybody from our member states to go back and emphasize on human rights education in our schools, in our homes, even in our rural communities. Because somebody can just use poverty. You are poor, I can give you $100 equivalent to go and kill everybody in your village if you don't have the right kind of education. Because when you convert $100 in my country, it's $1 million use. That's a lot of money. Somebody could be given $1 million or even 10 million, which is $1,000. And that person can actually go and kill everybody in their community for some crazy ideology. Why? Because he was not getting the right type of education. So let us go out there and educate our people on the importance of human rights education. Thank you for that.
Before I invite the next speaker, I want to acknowledge a very dear friend, a young lady from Washington, D.C., who had been fighting for human rights for a long time, and she's been a very, very strong support in Washington, D.C. She could not make it today, but I'm sure she's going to watch this video. And I want to tell you, Farhana Shafi, that I really appreciate your efforts for the human rights. And I would like you to give her a round of applause as well. She is watching us live somewhere. So now I'm going to invite another youngster, another young, very, very energetic, educated young man. He's an attorney by profession, and he's a human rights attorney. So I'm going to invite my very dear friend, a younger brother, Honorable Salman Rawala. By the way, he also tried to sleep behind his flu, and I checked, he does not have flu, he has cold, so he can still talk.
Thank you. I tried lawyering my way to get out because of the cold. I didn't want to get other people here sick. So I want to apologize if you hear sniffles and sneezes. I am here because of my commitment to human rights, but also because of my friendship with the dear ambassador. Thank you for having me. Excellencies and honorable guests, good afternoon. I want to start by thanking the International Human Rights Commission and the Human Rights Relief Fund Trust for inviting me to say a few words. Regrettably, I will have to cut my remarks short. I have to apologize. Today, December 10th, is indeed a special day to host this auspicious event. Today, as all of you know, is Human Rights Day. As the global community celebrates December 10th, we must remind ourselves of our commitment to human rights, all of us. And to do so, we must start with the beginning. December 10th, today, 1948, the advent of the Declaration of Human Rights, adopted across the street at the global stage, the brightest green light endorsing all of our rights, irrespective of our legal background, our cultural background, our religious background, our ethnic background. A signal to advance the inalienable rights of all members of the human family towards the advancement of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. But we can't stop at the beginning, December 10th. We must continue to seek light, but where? Perhaps Eleanor Roosevelt, who many of you may know as the first representative of the United States government to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, said, quote, "We must advance those rights in small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Unless these rights have meaning in those small places, they have little meaning anywhere else. Without concerted citizen action from each of you to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. And we must not stop in our villages, our cities, our communities, and our countries. We must speak up against injustice and oppression wherever we may find it. And as global citizens who are now connected more than ever, with the advent of social media, around-the-clock news, and 24/7 connectivity to our friends and family across the world, as we seek to advance human rights globally, we must not forget to look inwards, deep within our own soul, where it all starts. You have all showed up here today, and I am sure you have all stood up in the past. And I am sure that you have also spoken up in the past. So I am going to request, please, please, please do not give up in the future. Thank you very much.
I'm sure he did very well, right? So I can have a medical practice as well, so you're fine, mashallah. Our next speaker is again a very, very learned person from academia, from Institute of Peace and Leadership, Dr. Reni Alapo. And by the way, after this, I'm going to request my brother Ambassador Fode Mansre to have interventions. Those of you who want to make a 1 minute comment or question, you have 1 minute after this. But inshallah, Ambassador Fode is going to manage that.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here today on this great occasion, International Human Rights Day 2019. Many times, women, I will speak on behalf of women because I'm a gender equality advocate for human rights. The human rights of women are usually ignored in many countries. And I would like to call on your esteemed persons today. And today also is the end of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which started on November 25th. So as human rights advocates, peace-loving individuals, I call on everybody to support the rights of women and girls worldwide, whether they're your children, your neighbors, your sisters, your aunties, grandmas, your wives, put it into consideration to enlist, your political leaders, your community leaders to support the human rights of women. And with this, I would like to also acknowledge the presence of my students from CUNY, from Borough of Manhattan Community College. Stand up if you're here. So this semester we have a project, a service learning project, which our class Intro to Politics was funded to have a service learning project, and part of it is working on looking at ways that we can improve women's access to education, to health, to greater positions, women and girls' human rights. And with that, I would like to also, acknowledge 3 individuals that were recommended for their work in human rights and for the contributions they've made in their various communities. This award is by the Universal Peace Federation. Unfortunately, I was not able to bring any other person from the Universal Peace Federation with me, but if there are any ambassadors for peace around, I would like them to stand up so they can be acknowledged. There are 3 individuals we're going to acknowledge today and present the Ambassador for Peace Award to. The first is Mr. Thomas Brigandi. The second is Dr. Uche Daniel Chidi. And the third is Miss Marie Rosie Sirikari. In order for these individuals to be presented this award, there are a couple of questions that we ask them, and that they have to acknowledge, they have to be peace-loving citizens, they have to have respect for human rights, they have to have tolerance for others' religion and others' people's views, and also the work that they contribute to the human rights community at large has to actually center as respecting everyone as one family under God. I'm going to read what this Universal Peace Federation Ambassador for Peace Award says. The Universal Peace Federation acknowledges as ambassadors for peace those individuals whose lives exemplify the ideal of living for the sake of others, and who dedicate themselves to practices which promote universal moral values, strong family life, interreligious cooperation, international harmony, renewal of the United Nations, a responsible public media, and the establishment of a culture of peace. These individuals have to also acknowledge before being presented this award that they transcend racial, national, and religious barriers, because ambassadors for peace contribute their fulfillment of the whole of all ages, a unified world of peace wherein the spiritual and material dimensions of life are harmonized. Is that the case for all 3 of you?
Yes.
Do you acknowledge all this?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies. Yes. The Universal Peace Federation is proudly hereby recognized as Ambassador for Peace, Ms. Marie Rose Sirikari. Congratulations. Next, the Universal Peace Federation is proud to hereby recognize as an ambassador for peace, Mr. Thomas Brigandi.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Congratulations so much.
Last but certainly not the least, the Universal Peace Federation is proud to hereby recognize as an ambassador for peace, Dr. Kuje Daniel Chidubem. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may we please give a round of applause for all these newly elected ambassadors. And thank you also to the ambassador for peace that are in the room. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, congratulations. Yes.
And before I pass it on to my brother, Ambassador Fode Mantre, I'm going to invite my brother, Reverend Hartford, to say 2 minutes only. 2 minutes. 1 minute? Okay, 50% discount. Thank you.
Wow. First of all, I want to give honor to God, who's the head of my life. That's the first thing I'm going to say. Who would have ever thought that I would be here speaking at the United Nations for the Human Rights Day? It's an honor and a privilege to be here today. I thank my brother Malik, all the wonderful ambassadors, international leaders here, men, women, most of all the young people. You young people are the future, from New Jersey, Connecticut, Canada, wherever you're from, Long Island. Can I have the young people from Sewanaka High School stand up? The principal, my wife, the teacher, Mike. I want to let you guys know that this is their first time being actually here amongst you world leaders. And we wanted to bring them for them to have this experience. Most of our children of color don't really have the opportunity or the access to hear and converse in this manner. And to hear this wonderful ambassador over here talk about social economics, right? And the diverse way in which the world really works together. And that's one of the things that the principal said to me. He said, I want these young people to come out and have this experience and learn about really what's going on across the globe. So again, I thank you guys for this wonderful opportunity. And last but not least, I've been given a wonderful opportunity to give young people of color, men and young ladies, the opportunity at Brookhaven National Labs to give them access to STEM education. I want to be able to work with you guys as ambassadors around the world. I sit on a committee for education relevant to STEM. I want to work with each and every one of you, if given the opportunity, to advance STEM education around the world so that we can help all young people and all people all over the world to realize their potential that's in them, to make this world a better place. Thank you once again.
And by the way, 1 year from now, when we celebrate the next year Human Rights Day, I want you, all of you, high school, Seneca High School students, we are going to work with your principal and your teacher to have a speech competition in next 12 months to have at least 2 of you to come here on the podium and deliver the speech. Be ready. Okay, so all over to my brother Fode Mansari. He has been very patiently waiting for his turn.
Thank you. Well, I want to take this opportunity as usual to say thank you to all the youths. For those of you who don't know, he says I do all the work and he takes the credit. That is not true. I get all the youths to do the work and then I tell him I did the work. But we have outstanding youths, lots of them in this room, who have been working day in and out. So anybody who was involved in the planning of this event or who has been working, because there's a lot of you guys here, please stand up. If you have collaborated with the International Human Rights, please also stand up, because we don't have enough time. That's why I'm doing this. Please stand up, please. Honorable Eto, please. Anybody, if you have collaborated, the youth, please. I want to say thank you. Didi, I want to say thank you so much to you for the support you have given to international human rights over the years. And I want to call Dr. Daniel, please come upstairs, because we did something that is unique. Then I'm going to leave the floor with the youth, because I promised myself that we are going to be like the plane and the wing in the way we are going to work in the future. Because the plane is always gliding. If the wind hits it this way, it goes this way. So that's where I think we're going to be able to work together between the young women and the men, because I cannot say my idea is superb or superior. I listen a lot. We listen a lot to the youths. So we came up with a list that we can, it's called the 100 most valuable human rights defenders. We look throughout around the world, and that list we publish today silently. Some people who are on that list, they don't even know their name is on the list. Believe it. And they're in this room, they don't even know their name is on the list. And what we did is we took the list and give them to the youth. They went through your profile. If they submitted your name and said your name is there, your name is there. So I want to bring Daniel up. And Daniel, please come here, because you're going to do intervention. Intervention is 1 minute. Daniel is a PhD holder. He's well educated. Give me a round of applause. Well educated young man. And we have a lot of young people here who are educated, more educated than us. And I'm proud. I like people who are very ambitious, who wants to learn in life. And if you're around me and you don't want to progress, you know you're not going nowhere. Because my model is to push you around. And if you're strong enough, you'll make it, because I want you to be better than me. That is the model of international human rights. So Daniel, the intervention we are going to do here, Mohammed, please come around. Please come. I want to also introduce Mohammed. Mohammed is another young man, very learned, and he's a journalist now, because we train him to become a journalist. Skill set that everybody needs. The reason why we take these young people and push them around, that's my model. That's somebody's model. Didi will tell you over there. And I have to be strong with you, because you have to be better than me. If you fail, that means I fail. I want to have all of you to be able to call me Uncle Fode, so I have somewhere to go. So I will leave the floor now, please. The intervention is 1 minute. You guys can manage this, and there are a lot of people who want to speak. They came from afar, and let's give them the floor to speak. I saw the little young girl's hand is up over there, so we can start from the little ones first. I can vouch for them. They will say something more better than me.
Thank you, Your Excellency. First and foremost, I want to give all glory to the Almighty. And I also want to remind everyone, including my kids that are here, that for us to be here is a privilege. And what we have learned today and what Ambassador Malik and Ambassador Fode have constantly reminded us is that mankind is beginning to lose the essence of being human. The essence of being human is to see another person who is worse off than you and still say, no, I will be in the same condition with you and I will pull you out and I'll put you on the path of progress. And for us, human rights means different things to different people. In some places, it's about flooding. Who will come to my rescue when I have lost everything because of flooding? It's about drought. Where will I get the next meal when I know that people are having food wasting all over the world? So the Human Rights Day celebration today is an important integral part that every single person must be reminded that there are diverse platforms and diverse people with different opinions about human rights. But what is more important and the common factor in everything is that we should always express the better version of ourselves. We should see people in need, relate with them in their challenges, and try to pull them up. Again, I want to thank the organizers of this event, especially His Excellency Ambassador Malik and Ambassador Fode for giving young people the opportunity, and for all the young people I see here. I pray that as we continue to grow in strength and we continue to interrelate and create this intergenerational partnership, it will augur well for us and our kids, and then the world will be better for it. Thank you so much.
Please, let's make it 1 minute, right?
All right. Good evening, everyone. I didn't expect to be talking today, but thank you for coming. It's very important that we all showed up today, that we're supporting international human rights, and that we trying to move forward with our agendas, that we're trying to make a world a better place, that we want to create sustainable development for us and for our future and for our children. And yes, please stay on the good path, think about each other, thank your neighbors, thank your friends, thank your family, and thank you all. And have a good day and good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good evening, my name is Teddy. I would like to become silent the day we My name is Teddy. I would like to become silent the day we allow our leaders to keep rolling our life. They always they disrespect the youth. I'm trying to introduce my friend who want to give a speech about what is going on in Nigeria. So I still want to give appreciate the guy in Nigeria that is really working hard for the youth. His name is Deji Adeyanju.
Thank you very much, everybody. We don't want to take your time. The reason I came all the way from Toronto, Canada for this event is because of the seriousness of what is going on in Nigeria. It is going on in so many places, but especially in Nigeria right now. We respect the organizers of this program. We don't want to be disrespectful to you. We want to be as diplomatic as possible. But we want the whole world to know that the president of Nigeria, General Muhammadu Buhari, has turned Nigeria into a lawless state right now as I speak to you. A resident of New Jersey, in the person of Omoyele Sowore, is now in detention just for speaking about the same thing that this program is talking about. That's why we came all the way to United Nations to let the whole world know what is going on. He's been imprisoned just for demanding for freedom of speech, for demanding for basic things that people need to survive in Nigeria. There's so many things that we can say, but I know that you have given us only 2 minutes. I wish we had the time to read what we have, but I would respect you. Maybe there'll be another time for this. We shall give a speech, a recorded speech after this, where we can tell the world how we feel. But there is a letter from the wife of this man who is right now in prison. He was granted bail, and when he was about to walk out of the courtroom, the president ordered the State Security Service of Nigeria to come into the courtroom with guns pulled, that the judge had to run out of the courtroom. And they chased the lawyers away, and they rearrested him, and they disrespected and desecrated the courtroom. That is the kind of thing we have in Nigeria right now. I'm going to allow the wife, who is not able to make it here today, for her speech to be a brief version of her speech to be made by our brother. Thank you very much. Sorry, my name is Dr. Chidi Adet-Wanyang.
Good evening, everybody. All protocols to be observed. Thank you for this opportunity, the organizers of this program. We thank you, we commend you. Thank you, Ambassador, for this opportunity to present this letter. The wife of Omoyele Sowore, she's supposed to be here, but she can't make it down. She sent the speech for me to read on her behalf to the United Nations. My name is Dr. Awe. I reside here. I'm delivering this speech on behalf of Omoyele Sowore. Today, December 10th, as the world celebrates Human Rights Day, my husband, Omoyele Sowore, sits in an isolated prison in Nigeria, where he has been illegally abducted and detained by the President Buhari regime for 130 days and counting. Many people know my husband as a human rights activist and for his work as founder of New York-based Sahara Reporters. He shed light on corruption, human rights abuses, and political misconduct in Nigeria. Omoyele Sowore's case is not isolated. His case represents something much bigger than his individual struggle for governance, for good governance, acceptable living standards, and his dream of a Nigeria that works for all its citizens. Today, Agba Jalingo and many other journalists, activists, and bloggers sit in prisons across Nigeria in clear violation of their fundamental human rights. Their collective cases represent a crackdown on freedom of speech, press, freedom of expression, and a clear sign of shrinking civil space in Nigeria. President Buhari's regime has shown a clear disregard for the rule of law, openly violating court orders for release of many of these critical voices. Also for profound concern at the recent social media and hate speech bills that are designed to legally silence critics of the Nigerian government. This Human Rights Day, I am calling on the United Nations to please intervene on behalf of my husband, Omoyele Sowore, and on behalf of all other political prisoners of conscience in Nigeria. I am scared, fearful that without your help, my husband will not come home, and that is the fact. I have had to comfort my young children in the middle of the night when they've had nightmares. 12 hours after the release of my husband, I had to tell my children that the Nigerian government had illegally taken him into custody again. My husband's life and the life of many other journalists and activists depend on your action and swift intervention. Thank you, Dr. Awe, on behalf of Omoyele Sowore, speaking for the wife. Thank you. Before I go, I would like to use the opportunity to talk, to call on the representative of the Oni of Ife. He's the supreme ruler, supreme Oba in the Yoruba kingdom in Nigeria, to please stand up and speak on behalf of one of his sons, Omoyele Sowore, to call on the Buhari government to do the right thing, to obey justice, obey court orders, and release Omar Shika. Please, sir, we ask you to send this message to Onion People. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, my brother. Just like I started my program with this International Declaration of Human Rights, the Article 9 says, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, and exile. Article 10 says, everyone is entitled to full equality to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal in the determination of his rights and obligation and of any criminal charges against him. So if we get the formal complaint from you, formal request for intervention, we will engage the government of Nigeria and the Honorable President of Nigeria to resolve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, let's make it short. There are many people here. We want to know where we are going to take this from here on. The intervention. Didi, 1 second before you go. I'm going to call Dr. Rochester. Please come. I know you patiently sat down there. It's just an oversight. And please, I know you have a long piece of paper, but it's 1.5 minutes. I have the mic. I can put a pause. Come on, please. I'm apologizing to the young ladies.
I will try to be very brief. I am normally not brief at all. One of the things that I wanted to do in the U.S. in particular, and with Black people in the U.S., was help people to understand the financial cost of discrimination against Black people in this country from the time of slavery up until the present, and to do so by looking at what published research has said from the finest institutions in the country, and lay plainly and barely what the cost is. In the world that we live in, everything is driven by economics. People don't really care very much how you feel. It's what can you quantify and prove. And I lay that out in a powerful paradigm shifting way. The most grotesque form of discrimination leads to the violation of human rights. And the violation of human rights is typically done for an economic reason. And it is based on the idea of superior versus inferior. One of the things that I did, and I'll try to be very brief on this in my last talk at Google, was to try to help people understand what the economic cost of not including people into the innovation system is. And this is very important for us to know. Talent, skill, ability, determination, it is evenly distributed across people, across ethnicities, across religions. There is no greater way to maximize economic benefit than by respecting human rights, than by investing in people, especially young people and women, so that they can achieve the fullness of their potential. That is very clear from an economic standpoint. They call it diversity and inclusion. But when you allow people to develop to their fullness, you see the financial benefit. And since people are driven almost totally by profit motive, we need them to understand that they are losing money by acting in these really disrespectful and discriminatory ways.
You want to make 1 minute? 1 minute.
Hello everyone, my name is Didi Paul. I'm a Goodwill Ambassador for International Human Rights. Also, I'm a president and founder of 1000 Share of Women International. I am here today to talk about international human rights. What they did to me, they empower me. They make me today believe in myself that today I can. In Togo, I have 800 women from starting from nothing today. They're building their own empire. They also kids in the school system. Now, because of international human rights, they have good school. I don't know if you guys know, the madrasa is the Arabic school. It's so bad in Africa, they have to beg on the street. With the international human rights now, instead of begging, we build to make them learn to do agriculture. So now they have 1 year food that they the one who make it, and also from that they can sell and build their own school. That's the job the international. Not only also with what they're doing also with the microcredit, helping empower women so they can have their own money and their own. So we're gonna be brief just to say thank you to the International Human Rights, to Ambassador Fode and Ambassador Malik. Even now they're planning to build like cancer center, different part of the world. So the International Human Rights, not only to advocate also, but they are great part, they're doing great humanitarian. And today they make me be one of the best humanitarian. So thank you so much, International Human Rights.
By the way, those of you who would like to see the recording of this program tomorrow on Raham TV, which we represent, and I host a live TV show as well, raham.tv. You can watch this recording, the whole recording. Yasir sir, kitne baje hai, what time?
But tomorrow 6 p.m.
6 p.m. Tomorrow 6 p.m. you can see the whole program on the raham.tv. Thank you. And Facebook as well. Yeah. Okay. Raham.tv.
Yes, hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Rogina. Thank you. And I want to call your attention to these lights that you see here and the postcards that you had on your seat. This here is called Peace Lights, and it's an internationally recognized symbol of peace. The colors represent the different cultures of the world, and the motion represents how those cultures work together and interact to achieve harmony and peace and good energy. It says the word peace lights in 55 different languages, and this version here also says the 30 human rights. This plays all over the world and has come to represent peace and togetherness around the world. Now, an important thing about these lights, wherever it plays around the world, literally 6 or 7 continents, extended plays 3 times in Times Square, over 30 United Nations events, concerts, etc. Wherever it plays, people are encouraged to project their own thoughts and intents for peace into those lights. So this is collective energy. And I invite you to make a deposit into that or withdrawal with Aspera member who is under-recognized. She's an icon of the civil rights movement, Claudette Colvin. And it was her example and her actions 9 months before Rosa Parks that accelerated the timeline and therefore literally saved lives. Now, we've heard, I agree with what Her Excellency said before, that human rights education has to become a priority. The African Union has a 50-year plan in it under Aspiration 4. It calls for peace education. Now, human rights is a piece of peace education. But it's not the entire thing. And I would argue